It's so interesting because that you are literally, you guys broke up in 90, but you are literally a few years away from the offspring happening on that label. And it's just so interesting, just how life works out and timing and stuff.
Yeah. Yeah.
What if there was one show, well, actually, what, I'll ask that later. So then you guys do break up, but then you guys end up coming back, and you guys came back, I want to say it was early 2000s.
2004. I guess what had happened was we kind of like INSTED breaks up. Steve, Kev moves away to Colorado. Steve and I and Bear, started doing other music. Blah blah blah. I think the INSTED records became out of print based on the labels that were now didn't exist, aside from what we believe on Epitaph. And I think a resurgence of the scene. Every few years you get a new generation of kids, and there was interest in releasing the record as a discography. And so that's when Dave Mandel came to us and said, "Hey, what if we can collect all the records that are out of print and put them on one, and the CDs and this and that." And we thought about it, and when we broke up, it wasn't like we were enemies or anything. So we all talked on a regular basis. So we thought about it, and there was also a couple unfinished songs that we kind of reminisced about too. At least Steve and I. And we thought, well, that'd be kind of fun to finish those up and then put everything on one thing and put it out if that's what people want to have. And so that's what we did in 2004 with INDECISION Records. We ended up doing that, and we were able to finish up those couple songs, 2 or 3 songs. And then when it came out, the celebration of it was, why don't you guys just play again? And there was all that stuff that happened in between, in the 90s and the early 2000s of your set, like Youth of Today had done so many versions of reunions, and the word reunion was a bad word, and we thought, I don't want to be a part of that. We don't want to be like all that. But this kind of made sense a little bit more. Like, at least we were celebrating a re-release of some material where some of the other bands were not. They were just like bored and broke or whatever, and they would just do reunions. And I felt a little bit different. Like we had a little bit of a reason. We're celebrating this release, and we're still straight edge and still into hardcore, and there was nothing that was odd to me. Didn't feel like.
And you guys got to, corrent me if I'm wrong, you guys got to then go to Europe.
That's when we got to go to Europe. So we ended up doing, we went back east and played CBGBs and New Jersey and Boston or somewhere out there. And then when we came home, a couple of the promoters in LA were like, well, you guys are an Orange County band. Why don't you play here? You guys went out to the East Coast and did this reunion, to celebrate this discography. Why don't you play there? So we booked a couple shows at the Showcase, which we always played Spankies and all that stuff. So we thought, well, that'd be cool. Let's do that. We thought about doing the Glass House or whatever, but we wanted to keep it kind of intimate. So we did that, and then all of a sudden we're getting calls from Europe saying, hey, guys, you never came to Europe, And so we thought, well, shit, why not, right? At this point, why not? And so we ended up doing that, and that was fun. Finally got to go to Europe, and that was 2005 we ended up doing.
If there was one show, and this is kind of I don't know if this is a hard question or not. If I actually have 2 questions along this line, but if there was one show that you could sum up, that you feel sums up INSTED's energy, what INSTED was about, that you would want, let's say, 50 years from now, you would want other generations to see, what show would that be in INSTED's history?
There are so many, as you're saying that, that were flashing through my mind. And there's not just 1 or 2 or 10 probably. But, I mean, there was some real significant shows that I felt like we were really at our peak. There was a show at Fenders, and all the bands that were on the bill were from New York, aside from us. But we were mixed in with Gorilla Biscuits and Bold and Youth of Today and all that. And that was a fun show because we were friends with all of them, and we were kind of representing Southern California, and the show was in Southern California, and kids went bananas, and we were having a great time. That's one that kind of stuck out. There's so many, it's hard to pinpoint one show because I like all of our shows for one reason or another. I mean, we did when we went to Europe, Kev got stuck in Canada missed a flight, but we were on such a tight timeline that we had to do the first show without him in Holland. And we told the promoter, look, he missed his flight. He's not here tonight, but we are. We still want to do the show. Obviously, there's a ton of kids outside, so can we still do it? We decided to do a karaoke version of it instead, which we thought could have been a total nightmare, but it ended up being one of the, if you were at that show, it was very unique. It was one of a kind situation, and we made the most of it. People had fun. They got to jump on stage and sing a song, and it was a wonderful night. You know?
I love that show's on YouTube also. Like, I love that like
it just came on. Yeah.
Yeah, people can like, if they watch this and they're like, oh wait, I wonder what that was like, they go back and they can find it. That's I love it. I love it. So now this question may not be any easier, but I asked Steve this. What is one song that if you were going to tell people, hey, this was INSTED, listen to this?
Oof. That's also hard. For me, I tend to go back to Feel Their Pain, because it not only musically but lyrically it touches on something that's still really important to me, which is animal rights. And, so that kind of sums up. And it was on the 7-inch. It was kind of the, let's say, the peak of the band. It's got a hard sound to it. The lyrics are short and to the point, direct. So I would say Feel Their Pain if I had to show somebody one song from us. But on the other hand, one of the songs at the tail end, One World, which opens up the discography, which was one of the last songs we wrote, I love that song too. I never got a chance to like become something with the band because we weren't playing it live or anything. But I love the music and the lyrics to that song too, because it also kind of hits home. So I can go all over the board. Live and Let Live on Bonds of Friendship is amazing.
It's interesting that you mentioned the directness of that, because Chuck Dukowski, another bass player of obviously much merit, Black Flag and Flag and all that stuff, he was talking about punk at one point, and he said punk is all about being direct. And that's like, I was like, that's such a beautiful way to sum up. Like, if you wanted to explain punk to people, and then here you are, I'm trying to get you to sum up INSTED in one song, and you say Feel Their Pain, and one of the reasons is because you say it's direct. I was like, wow, okay, that's a nice full circle thing.
Yeah, cool.
Now, here's the deal. I got like 5 more questions. Do you have time? We've been doing this for like an hour.
I have time. I don't know if you get shut down by Google. Is there a maximum thing that they...
I don't think so. I think Zoom would have. Zoom does it like by 40-minute increments. I'm saying let's go, because this will kind of encapsulate a lot. Because my next question, so how does LIDSVILLE happen with 3 of the members of INSTED after INSTED ends? Because I don't know if you guys thought about this, but I'm saying Kevin is great hardcore frontman. Even though you guys weren't playing hardcore, was that thought in your mind of like, hey, we're people are going to be judging for better or for worse. They're going to judge this guy versus that guy, even though it's different styles of music.
Yeah, that was well, INSTED ended, and it was kind of like, everyone was looking around going, what do we do? Kev knew what he was doing. He was, making a plan to marry this woman, and eventually, they moved out of the state. He was there during the formation of LIDSVILLE. He was just on doing other stuff. But where Steve and I and Bear were just kind of sitting around going like, wow, it's really over, And Steve was dating a girl who became his wife, and one of the neighbors was Greg Johnson, and he was some kind of nerdy guy that was in his garage writing songs and playing the guitar and whatnot. And he got to meet Steve, and they decided, let's do some music together. And this guy was not a guy from the hardcore scene at all. He was just a guy that was into like English pop and whatever else was happening, college rock. And so he was, they started jamming together, and Larson had said, hey, if you're looking for a bass player, Rich from INSTED is sitting around looking for music too. And so he brought me in. It was kind of the 3 of us in the very, very beginning. And then we wanted to add a 4th guitar player, and it was natural just to go, well, Bear's right there. Let's bring him in. And so it was comforting in one sense, because the three of us had played together for a long time and we were very comfortable with each other. But it was also it was a new style for us. It was something that we were not familiar with, especially from a songwriting stance. But Greg was the songwriter really, and writing the lyrics and whatnot. And until deeper into the history of that band is when I started writing music that style. I had to learn kind of how it was. But that's how it formed. It was kind of it wasn't thought out at all. It just kind of like one thing after another led to that, you know.
Did Greg have any thoughts of like, hey, I am following this guy Kevin who had been in this band instead, like, or was it just, hey, this is a totally different music, totally different scene, not even in a thought in his head?
Oblivious to the fact I don't think he understood the hardcore scene, so he just knew like, hey, this guy was in a band that made records and he plays drums pretty good, and he lives right next door here. So he started jamming, and then it's like, bring in this guy, bring in that guy. Okay, well, they obviously toured and made records and know how to play their instruments, and let's get them. And Greg, I don't think he had resources at the time. He just wanted to write songs, and so it just was easy to plug the three of us in pretty quickly, and we played his songs, you know.
You talked about some of the differences and styles of like writing that music. What like, and just, I mean, this could be a whole interview in itself, but like, what really struck you as different in playing in this new scene as opposed to playing in the hardcore scene? Like, what were some things that you were like going into, and maybe, you're, because you're still in your mind, you're the same person. So you're like, you have these ethos and this idea of what playing should be like. What were some things that when you first started playing with LIDSVILLE that you were like, oh, okay, so that's how it's done in this scene?
Yeah, it was definitely a separation of, this is not a hardcore scene, and the ethics and all that stuff that surrounded that scene. I'm now outside of it into this. I don't even know if there is a scene. It's just a band that's a rock band. So whereas the hardcore definitely has a scene. This is just something that we're doing. But I knew that it needed to be separate as far as like, what is he singing about? I have no idea. It's not a message. It's not a thing that we had back then. And the songs aren't aggressive and based on anger. They're just trying to be creative. So it's like, okay, this is very new, very fresh. It feels like an upgrade musically. Like, wow, I got to learn how to read music or whatever it is at the time. I'm like, so it was. I like that too, because it was new.